Call the meeting to order. Certify compliance with the open records law.
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Gillis.
Here.
Councilmember Hayden.
Here.
Councilmember Hooker.
Here.
Councilmember Raisler.
Here.
Councilmember Schofield.
Here.
Councilmember Weisenbeck.
Here.
All six are present.
Next, I have the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. It's adopted. Any public comments? Seeing no public. We don't have any scheduled appearances. The following matters may be acted upon by the City Council utilizing a single vote. Individual items which any member wishes to address in greater detail or as a separate item on the regular agenda may be removed from the consent agenda upon the request of any council member. We have the minutes from the regular City Council meeting from September 14th, 2022. Bartender license for Jody D. Whelan for the Rooster Tail Bar, Ashley M. Whittick for the Cell Block Lounge, Danielle K. Biederman for Bodie's Saloon, Jasmine M. Fuentes, and Donna M. West for the Durand Fresh Market. As far as we know, everything is fine.
Everything was good with the chief report.
Okay. Some motion on the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second.
We have a motion second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Approved. Next, we move along to the business agenda. Mayor's report. I really don't have anything to report on tonight. I've got some things to say when we got a couple of agenda items later, but there was nothing actually individually to do on the mayor's report tonight. Everything came up. Administrator's report. Administrator Rasmussen.
Kind of in the same boat, just a couple things to say, and then being that Stan's on vacation, obviously Matt's off tonight as well. Russ is gone as well. I'll be filling in for them as they were for me last time. So right now it's basically all budget all the time is what we're discussing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next on just a little bit of the process and some of the items that we go through every year. But I did want to bring up that we did have a rezoning request in town, and it's a little more convoluted than our typical one. It's the Laneville Daycare, looking to rezone from commercial to residential. I say it's a little more convoluted because for those of you that have been around for a while, and that's looking around, it's probably when this loan was issued, I don't think many of you were here. Neither was I, for that matter. But anyway, the partners there asked for a loan, 2 loans from the city. I think like $37,000 is still outstanding on that loan. In discussing this with the individual asking for the rezoning, clearly it's a case that they want to sell the home as quickly as possible. Now, what I indicated to her was we were going to need some information that typically we don't get along the lines of what kind of loan you have out with the bank and things of that nature to see if the city is actually going to get its money back. Because I guarantee you, as soon as we do rezone this, it is going to be gone, and if there's not enough money back for it, we're not getting paid, I don't think. So this does make this one a little more of a convoluted one. And because of that, we may be looking at, this is the Plan Commission meeting first, and then ultimately the council. Maybe it might even be a closed session item, just determining some of the things that are going to come up there. So
I do understand, Scott, the city doesn't have making things up.
Yeah.
There's a sale price.
right.
She comes to terms with someone and the amount of the sale is for less. We don't recover our money.
Correct. I mean, we're in a second position. Mhm.
We have no say?
Well, not really at that point. Again, so right now, clearly, the home is not, or the business is not selling as a commercial property.
Yeah.
I think what it was listed for as a commercial property, I think there would have been a good chance that everyone would come out okay. As a residential, initially, because it's not, basically it was transformed a little bit. It's basically got a big bathroom for daycare. The kitchen is small, or actually I take that back. I think it's got to have another bathroom added to even sell it as a residential. So with that case, our initial discussions were this might be worth only $100,000. And again, at this point, there wasn't a lot of willingness to share what the bank loan was. So that's clearly something I would need to gather and discuss again, probably in closed session when that time comes. for
Was
both
that a
planning commission.
residential, like, building referred into?
Exactly, man. It
Daycare?
was, yeah, I mean, it was a residential property, and again, daycares are conditional uses within, so they could have kept it, probably even technically as a residence, and the council could have, but they opted to go commercial. And so that's the, and so that's, yeah, that's a little bit of a convoluted one. Yeah, otherwise, that's really all I have, until we get into a lot of the other
Sure. Okay.
department discussion areas.
Okay, any questions for the city administrator? If not, we'll move update explanation of the 2023 budget process, including discussion regarding committee meetings, levy limits, debt service, employee benefits, mill rates, and final budget resolution.
Okay, so this one requires just a little explanation for what's going on. So basically, as you're aware, sorry, that's just coming up on my, let's go to the other, we'll go there for now. Recall in a recent meeting, one of the members of the council here asked a budget question that I took a little different slant. I apologize for my jump on that, but it got me thinking, and I have communicated, and Nick, I'm sorry, I'm just going to use your name here, from the standpoint of forgetting, frankly, that Don and Nick are newer members of the council. Don has been here before, so he's got a little, he's been through a process or two before. But however, so two folks there that and I know the rest of you can all use updates. Just kind of walking through these things again, because we only talk about them once a year. But the second part of that is, those of you that are on the three major committees, Public Works, Public Safety, and Finance, frankly, you get a little more budget discussion than those that aren't. And again, Nick and Don are not on those committees. So I just thought I'd take the opportunity with a little lighter agenda here, and as we're getting into the heart of the budget process, to just walk through some of these things again, and just kind of a reminder of what we're going through, especially when we're talking about things like levy limits and our debt service limitations. And I know the mayor's going to talk a little bit more about a pool meeting we had the other night, but this whole debt limit situation came up again. And again, about a year plus ago, when we were going through the whole Langville project, the spreadsheet I'm going to show you when we get there is basically the same spreadsheet that we talked about there, and looking at our street projects moving forward. We'll be talking about those at length next Wednesday when Matt is in for his public works discussion, especially on capital. And but again, the discussion that we had at that pool meeting the other night, clearly there's still some confusion even amongst the pool group members of why the city just can't jump in and borrow a bunch of money and finish this pool, even if we don't get the required donations. So with that being said, I'm going to just jump right into, I'm going to kind of start almost from the end here. So at the end of the day, here is a copy of our basically public hearing notice. And again, I'm gonna say something here that most finance people and those in my position are probably don't want me to say, but at the end of the day, the budgeting really isn't that complex. I mean, it used to be really easy in this business before we had levy limits. Basically, it was you figured out how much everything costs, everything that basically, in our case, the city does, how much everything costs. You look at all the general revenues, stuff we bring in from parks and camping in our case, and shared revenue and those things, and you come up with a difference, and you come up with a levy amount. And basically, if that levy amount, if the council thought that was acceptable to the taxpayers, you passed it and you went forward. Well, the hitch since basically 2005, is that we have levy limits, and we're only allowed to raise our levy each year by the percentage of new construction that we have in the community. And basically, the legislature came up with that formula, I'd say about, just over 12 years ago or so. And that's what we're stuck with. Not quite 12 years ago, a little more than that. But and the rationale behind that, if a city's growing more, well, then they should be allowed to add. If they're not, they really can't. Yeah, feel free, jump in, ask questions.
For discussion purposes, someone builds a building worth $1 million in city Durand.
Yeah.
And the amount collected for tax purpose for the city, I'm making this stuff up, is $300,000. Does that mean we can raise the levy limit $300,000?
It does not.
Does not.
It's so let's from the standpoint of what we had this year was we had about just over $400,000 worth of new construction. That turned out to be like 0.4%. So we're allowed to raise
0.4% of,
0.4% of our total equalized value of
Okay.
everything. So, so basically, we're gonna be allowed to raise our levies. It was and almost the same last year and the year before. We're gonna be allowed to raise our operational levy, but between $10,000 and $12,000.
is that the 0.04%?
Yeah, point, basically, so here, I'm gonna jump down here, and this is gonna help a little bit. Okay, so again, this is what we published in the paper last year, and I just wanna go over, I'll come back and go over the funds, but when we get down to the bottom, essentially, last year, and I know this gets confusing too, but so 2021, it was for the 2021 year for the 22 budget. So we passed this, obviously, November of 21. So we had a general fund, levy increase, in this case, there were some adjustments there, but it was only about 6,000, so it was about 1%. Library didn't have anything. I touched on that a little bit. Debt service levy went up, over 11%. So here's where I have to add that basically we're just talking operational levy, day-to-day things. Debt service is still completely exempt from any levy limits. So we can go out and borrow to our capacity if we choose so. Now, it costs a lot of money to pay it back, but you can continue to put that on the levy all you want, and it's completely exempt. So when we start talking about street projects and some of our other items, we don't ever have to worry about that. And the TIP piece is a little, it was a significant increase, but that's just driven by the increase in equalized valuation in the TIP district, except we don't control that. So really, we only really control these two items on the levy limit piece, and it turned out it was about 1%. Like I said, last year it was 0.38 is all we're allowed. So it's basically just of the total operational levy that we're allowed to raise that 0.1%. So it really doesn't have much to do with what the valuation is or things of that nature. But yeah, so that's kind of that in a nutshell.
Could you quickly, on the TIF district?
Yep.
Remember, we have one TIF active district.
One active TIF, yep.
And quickly explain how that works with, in lieu of, that we have two things that help pay that off, because we have debt from that.
Yep.
And it's paid off two ways. First of all, through, instead of tax money going to that, it goes to the TIF, and then also in lieu of the payment in lieu of taxes.
Okay, so you're talking about the TIF, and the TIF district itself is incorporated through a large portion of town. Basically, just even kind of roughly, it's all the way down to the supermarket, basically all the way up past Quick Trip to the other side of Family Dollar. So when we're talking about our discussions with Dollar General going into the old McMahon lot potentially, and it's still looking like they are, that would also be in the TIF district. Okay, so what a TIF district is. So, I mean, the best way to do is probably just touch on Quick Trip. So Quick Trip is in the TIF district. We have agreed with Quick Trip that basically what we would have provided to them is about $150,000 worth of road work that we split the cost with them. That's what the city has provided to them. In other cases, in other cities, I've seen it where, even to get to the development in, the city would pay even more for street projects or maybe parking lots and things of that nature. And so in a case like that, where it's just the city who's providing that services, what the TIF process allows is that the city then collects taxes. They pay, so when Quick Trip comes in, they're gonna pay the same tax rate that everyone else in the city of Durand pays. But the increment portion, in short, the cost of their building, because that's the new part, the increment. The land was there before, and valued before, but the increment part, all of the tax levy, the school's portion, the county's portion, CVTC's portion, comes back to the city, and then we're allowed to pay off those improvements that we've made over a number of years until it's all paid off, and then everything that's in the TIF district, all that additional valuation, if you will, goes back on the general tax levy for all to share and benefit from. Is that making sense?
And then you can renew it a certain amount of
Well,
times?
you
too?
can amend the map. You can amend the map, and you can also amend the basically the cost. So one of the reasons, so I've been waiting a little bit to amend our TIF district for our portion that we owe Quick Trip, or going to owe Quick Trip. Was waiting to see. I mean, we got a little bit. Matt's got a project on. I apologize if I'm missing it. Is it 13th Avenue? Just that little short right next to McMahon. Yeah, so we have a shared, we got some money from the county, some LRIP money that Matt's gonna use for that.
12.
I'm sorry, it's 12, okay. So that would also, that's probably also add to the TIF, that's only gonna be about $20,000. But basically, you know, those are the type of things that were allowed. In the past, it was some of what we provided for, you know, again, I mean, the quick, I kind of gave you just the rough, you know, but cobblestone is in the TIF, so the work that was there, the Shell Station area, McDonald's, that was all TIF related as well. And so, you know, again, they were paying the taxes, but on the increment, the addition of what they put in since the city you know, did some of that extra work, and as the mayor noted, most of it was we had to borrow to do that work. And so we're basically right now paying off debt service from those increment from the taxes we're generating from the TIF districts. So.
And there's a number of agreements in lieu of taxes, because they have to meet a certain
They have
number.
to meet a certain level,
And
yeah.
if it doesn't,
Yeah.
and then they also, then they pay extra.
Right, yeah.
To make sure that cost, and our TIF right now is in good financial shape. And how many years we got left, I don't know.
The 2033 is when it has to end. Our
At
expenditure
some point it
period
has to
ends
sunset,
in
and then at that point, if you wanted to start a new one, you can start a new one.
Exactly, yeah.
In fact, you can actually start multiple ones at the same time if you
You
want.
can, yeah, and close one early and start with another one, and at this point, you know, we see no reason for that. Mainly because there's so much of the city that's already in the TIF district. Oops, sorry there.
And the purpose is economic development.
Economic development, exactly, Matt. It's okay, so who is it that can provide, you're typically the street, expansion of water, sewer for a lot of things. Obviously, that's a city function, so that's why we're allowed to recoup that. And, you know, sometimes, you know, there's some complaints from school districts or counties that, well, you know, because everyone wants the TIF closed like ASAP. So then it's on the general and everyone's equalized valuation goes up. And but again, it's on the city side, it's okay, well, we gotta make sure it pays off first and foremost. You know, I've seen some TIF districts, at the end of that 2033, if it's not paid off, it goes on the city's general levy. And then, so then it's back to, the school doesn't help you with it, the county doesn't help you with it, CBTC doesn't help you with it, so you better make darn sure that as a city, that thing is gonna pay off in the time frame that you think it will. So yeah, but again, it's primarily an economic development tool that cities, and again, Wisconsin has, I think all the states in the union have some sort of TIF districts. Ours, I think it's fair to say ours are probably a little more restrictive than most. Just again, to make sure that these are necessary, you know, pieces, there's not a lot of fluff in there. You know, we're not building, I was involved in one in a former job where it was near a country club, and there, well, we'd like the city to help us rebuild our tennis courts. And yeah, I don't think that's a TIF. No, so we just declined, we weren't going there. So, yeah, so that's the TIF discussion. Again, and this is just kind of a reminder too, so what different funds that we operate with. So basically this encompasses all of the city. The general fund is just kind of as it sounds. It encompasses all of the general operations of the city. So all of our administration, police, fire, the public works that isn't utilities related. It's all of that and then everything else. And the next item, or the resolution actually outlines that just even a little bit better. But then we have the library fund, which operates all on its own. It's all accounted for separately. Debt service, all of our debt service is legally required to go through one fund. Our housing program is our CDBG that we run through with CEDAR, that every so often, you know, that committee gets asked to implement loans. TIF 3 we've talked about. Capital project is used just for kind of the general, I'll call it larger ticket items, because some of our smaller ticket capital items, and by capital we mean assets that are longer than basically a 5-year valuation. So like, for example, police cars, we keep in the general fund, but the capital projects fund here, and part of the reason why 2021 was such a large number, because that was the portion of general work on Laneville and Dryer and Upper Valley. But like some of Matt's big equipment will wind up in this fund as well. Then water, stormwater, and sewer are all the utility operations. And those are run like businesses in the governmental parlance. That they're enterprise funds, which means they're treated just like a business. They have, you know, basically the way you account for receivables and depreciation and things like that are just like any other business. Whereas the general fund is, we run things a little bit differently there. And then finally, we split up capital for that project as well. And then finally, we have the ambulance fund, which again is everything that's ambulance related is accounted for in that fund, also run like a business, and then a resident tax fund.
But the one thing we did a few years ago, and we worked on that, was sort of the cost centering thing. Here's an example of something. We used to, we obviously have to have an audit every year, and the total audit fees throughout the whole year is how much money?
Typically somewhere in the neighborhood of $45,000 to $50,000.
To do all the auditing for the city, all the things, so on and so forth. Everybody's got to pay for all, so on and so forth. What we do is, the cost of that used to be all in the general fund.
Right.
What we did was, we removed it and said, every fund has to help pay for the audit, because every fund is audited. So, so part of it is taken, that's just an example, and then when we have staff that are paid to do certain things, that comes out of certain funds also, because they are doing activities that are specifically for those funds.
Right, yeah, and I will touch on that a little bit on the staff side, too.
Yeah.
We'll talk about
Yeah.
staff expenditures as well. Okay, and this just gives a little different idea, like I said earlier. So within the general fund, obviously, the services that are on the table here tonight are general fund, administration, a portion of my salary, Angie's salary, and Jen's salary. Public works, again, related to Matt and his 4 employees. It's like snow removal is all in the general fund. Everything with crack sealing and things of that nature. All the parks is tied into that as well. Police department, obviously a big one. Fire department. And then there's our capital general that, again, a little bit for various departments, but the biggest one tends to be the chief's police cars every year. And then the non-departmental is mostly insurance, and then those things that we provide, like some of our payments to the local agencies for the events. I'm missing some of our economic development pieces are in there as well.
What is the decision factor on squad cars being in the general fund versus
It's
capital?
At this point, it's one of those things, Matt, we could take it out, but back to those levy limits. So the fact that, or the reason, or since the city of Durand has always had police cars, and we couldn't play with that levy limit formula by saying, oh, we're gonna take them out now and save ourselves 20 grand a year. We'd have to make an adjustment for that.
Okay.
So we just keep them.
I just didn't know if there was an advantage.
Yeah,
one or the
yeah,
other.
there really isn't. If we hadn't done it, or if we had made that change back in 2004, then we wouldn't have to worry about it now. But, and then, yeah, just again, the splits again, by the different funds that we showed, through there again. So ultimately, this is what the council will see at the various levels. So those of you that are on Public Works next week, you're going to see the entire Public Works budget. And then it's going to be line by line item for the general fund items, water utility, sewer utility, stormwater utility, and then all Matt's capital. So that tends to be probably one of our longer meetings, and
Sure, and remember that, obviously all council members are invited to come and listen
Right.
to those, if you want to follow along with any of those. By the way, the other thing about it on the revenue side, the incremental, that's mainly shared revenue.
shared revenues, yeah, I'm sorry.
Because the state divvies up money to everybody, to all government agencies based on that, and then they have a formula, it's blah, 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 and that's how we end up with. That's the majority of that.
Yep, and that's, I have that here somewhere. So that's almost $500,000 a year. And some of the other intergovernmental charges for services with other agencies and things of that nature. Licenses and permits are just what they are, fines and forfeitures. Public charges for services are, a lot of that is like camping revenue and things of that nature in there. I'm trying to think some of the other big ones that are in there. It's slipping my mind at the moment. But
Did you get our state aid numbers yet?
we have not, yeah. We have not gotten those yet. Typically, we should get those within the coming weeks. And then again, obviously when you get down to the utilities, what you see for the charges on the bills are almost exclusively what comprise the revenue for those 3 utilities. If there's no questions on there, I do want to spend some time then back to, as I talked about this sheet on our debt capacity. Okay, make sure I got it. Okay, so this is kind of an update that I did back when we were again talking about the Laneville project back in 2021. And we did some analysis looking at some of the borrowing we were going to have to do again back that quick trip project. We're talking a little bit more about, okay, is the city going to have to kick in some more money for the pool potentially? This line item called swimming pool work in progress, I got 100, because even best case scenario, if things would have worked out exactly the way we wanted them to, we would have probably had to borrow 101.5 million for a very short term, but all that would have been paid back down here through basically the ends of the donations from some of our generous donors. So again, we were hoping that that we weren't going to have to borrow anything. Right now, we're in a situation where things don't look quite that rosy. But to that level, in trying to figure out what some of our planning was in the future. So just going back to 2021, this number, the equalized valuation, let me just talk about that number just real quickly. So I think you're aware, well, I shouldn't say that again because we have some members that have not had to participate in the process with our open book or board review. So the city hires, and city, all townships basically hire an assessor, a professional assessing firm to assess, value all the property in the municipality. That person is Barrett Brenner with Chimney Rock on the Mondovi. Barrett's been with us now for 10 years, something like that, pretty close, maybe not that long.
Not that long,
Yeah.
he's probably been 6 or 7.
Yeah, playing for a little while.
So what Barrett does is he does a valuation. We have the open book or review where citizens can come in, and if they think that their assessment is off, once a year we legally have to give them that opportunity to come in, and then Barrett takes those numbers, those assessed valuations, and sends them to the State Department of Revenue, and they come up with equalized valuation. And the difference between assessed and equalized is basically cities and townships and taxing entity, well, I shouldn't say that, those that send out the tax bills are interested in assessed valuation because that's how the tax bills are calculated, or the mill rates are calculated, and we'll get to that a little later. The equalized valuation, what the state does there is they take all the property in the city of Durand and they kind of equalize it both throughout the county and throughout the state as a whole. So essentially, they try to compare what, you can say a 3-bedroom ranch home in the city of Durand is in relation to say one in Madison or one elsewhere. And what basically that's used for primarily then is ultimately when the entities like the county and the school district and CBTC, when they go to allocate what their taxes are, those allocations are based on equalized valuation. And then, so again, the state is just trying to come up with some way to make it as fair as possible in their eyes for all the municipalities in the state, and then come up with something that when you're allocating out the taxes, because then ultimately, so for example, when the school district comes up with their tax, their portion, or the county, in our case, and you've heard me say this a few times, the city of Durand's portion is 15%. That's based on equalized valuation. Our equalized valuation is 15% of the total equalized valuation in the entire county. And so that's how their portions of taxes and the school district's portion of taxes and CBTC's are allocated to the residents of Durand or the township, all of our townships around us and throughout the state. So you'll hear me go, I'll probably talk more about equalized valuation because again, this is more of a statewide thing where frankly, the only one that cares about the assessed valuation in the city of Durand is the people in the city of Durand. Nobody else cares about it because it's not used for anything. Okay, so this, where this equalized valuation number comes in from the state, again, Barrett sends in the numbers. Last year they came up with that. And then what our debt limit is, the total amount that the city of Durand can borrow or have borrow at any given time is 5% of that number. And so that was a hard number last year. So basically our debt limit was $5.535 million. That's all we could borrow in general borrowing at any given time. We'd never borrow more than that. We can't referenda ourselves out of that. That's the number, state statute. That's as good as it gets. So basically with roughly the net outstanding of 3.38 million, we had a remaining capacity of 2.1 million, or basically we were at 61% of our limit. Again, we spent a fair amount of time talking about this. You know, when we jump out into the future a little bit, and I don't know, so Matt's,
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
That number, our debt service, are the auditors good with that number? Is there a number they look for?
Oh, you know, there, as far as, I'm sorry, this percentage,
Yeah.
there really isn't. It's really, it's up to you. I mean, you never want to get too close,
Yeah.
you know, up in here, because if something were to happen, I mean, even an emergency, if we would have a catastrophe, we couldn't borrow anything more. There's no getting around that. I mean, there are some provisions on the levy limitation worksheet, if there is a catastrophe that you need as an emergency, you can. But yeah, that's kind of the, you know, the downside there. So you'd like to leave yourself a little bit of leeway, you know, but that's unique to each municipality. Okay, so basically this is what we looked at, and you say and then looking ahead a little bit, you know, Matt had out in 2025, he was looking at one's Main Street, and then Prospect maybe out in 2029. And these are just very rough estimates at this point. But yeah, unfortunately, looking down here, so, you know, at the end of, using these same figures, at the end of 2025, we were, you know, in a negative situation. And then we're skirting real close to those limits for a while, and then when we get out here, you know, we've got a problem again. So, you know, that's kind of, you know, back to why we kind of, now, to some degree, some of these numbers have changed a little bit, and I'm gonna jump to that right now. So on the plus side, where we're kind of sitting now, so this is our new equalized valuation figure for 2022. We just got this figure a couple months ago. It was almost a 13% increase, almost exclusively due to the economic boom we had for a while there. So again, so the state is looking at all of our assessments, you know, sent to them by our assessor, and they're coming up with on an equalized valuation level throughout the state, we are now worth closer to 125 million. So now on the plus side of that, you know, that automatically increases our debt limit, you know, 6.2 million, of which now we've got about 3 million remaining, or about 50%. Again, this gets a little hairy when we get out toward the end here, but it doesn't look quite as bad as it did on the previous shot than when we talked about that roughly a year ago. Still, we're gonna have some issues out here when we get to Prospect Street at closer to 2029 and things of that nature. Now, the one thing I do want to show you here is back to what I said earlier regarding the pool discussion. Okay, so in this scenario, obviously things have changed a bit. I've moved some of these figures from 22 over to 24 and adjusted the payback period of and things of that nature. But one of the questions that came up the other night was, again, why can't the city just go out and borrow more money for the pool? And okay, you know, here's why we can't. So let's say we borrow an additional, you know, million here. Oh. I'm used to dealing with the other screen. I can't find my delete. You gotta be kidding me here.
It's way up at the very top.
Here, I'll go this way, man.
You'll catch it.
There we go, yeah. Okay. Okay, let's say we borrowed, just for the city, another $1 million to make this pool work. And frankly, we're still not there, right? Because we need $1.5 million at this point. Okay, look what that does to our debt capacity then. Basically, if we were to okay with Matt for the project for 2025, we're already in the hole. Oops. Oh, I need to go back on that. There. Oops, that didn't help either. Okay, sorry about that. So we're already in the hole, we're already over capacity, and then again, when we get way out here, we're in even worse shape. So there's just no way we can do that without putting any of our state projects in complete risk. So, I think,
And remember, this borrowing is just general,
right,
because the other thing that we can borrow against our revenue funds,
the utilities.
the utilities,
Yeah.
use water and sewer payments to pay those off, but yet those also have to be somewhat under control. You just can't borrow, because especially for water, because the state is going to come, well, hold it a second.
Yeah, they control our rates.
They control our rates, and so that is another part of the debt that we can use, but again, we got to have the revenues coming in to pay that off. Yeah.
So again, we do have some options, but you know, looking at this scenario here, my recommendation would be you just can't do that. you hamstring yourself so much that it just doesn't work that way. Which frankly is why we've been working so hard to get these donations, and obviously the generous donors that we had, and the bad news with the increased estimates are really troubling. So I hope that explains that piece a bit. I'll wind it up here and just.
Do you know offhand, Scott, if you ever see the equalized valuation go down?
Yeah, yes, I mean, that's, yeah. So it didn't show here, essentially the first year here, back in 20, so this number, the 97 million there, the year before that, I think it was over 100 million. It actually.
Yeah, I think it was, because that was on, that was on my first.
So that, we actually had a year where it went down, and that is very unusual. And some of that was driven by economic factors, but also, if I remember, the co-op lost some buildings, and that was, so again, if you lose buildings for whatever reason, obviously that'll go down as well. But that is very rare. And, even trying to, looking at, we're just estimating a 2.5% increase every year. Very conservative, but especially when these last couple of years you've been looking at an 8% increase, 4% increase on that year, but this year a 13. On the plus side, our equalized valuation and new construction should go up significantly in 2023 because Quick Trip and a few other projects that are out there as well. So, yeah, so again, fingers crossed there, and that things bode a little bit better. Okay, just to kind of maybe finish up a little bit here, I did want to look at. I did want to touch on, okay, so here's we talk about our mill rates. So ultimately, the mill rate is just basically the dollars per thousand that you pay in your taxes. So if you own a $100,000 home, and the mill rate is, and these read a little bit funny, our combined mill rate here is, so that's $22.76. If you own a $100,000 home, you're getting a tax bill in the city of Durand for $2,276. That makes sense. And that's split out, again, by entity. So the top one is the county's number, and this is last year. And then these are before, so we get totals for the county, local, that's city, us, school district. Obviously, the city of Durand is just in one school district, the school district of Durand, where others in the county, so this is a county spreadsheet.
Is that where Barrett's number comes in for us?
So basically, so for example, so Barrett does just the city of Durand.
Yep.
And he works for some of the other townships too, I don't know which ones, but, so basically he submits those, and then, so for the school district standpoint, especially so on school districts, or counties are a better one, where you have, 15, 16 different municipalities within Pepin County. So that's where the equalized value part is, comes in. The assessed is, again, the only people that care about the assessed are the people of that community. And those that, in my position that work.
So when you say $100,000 home,
Okay, yeah.
is it off of?
It's off of the assessed.
It's off of the assessed.
Assessed, yeah. So if your home is assessed at $100,000, the equalized valuation on your home, and you don't see those listed very often. What you will see sometimes on the county website, you'll see there's a percentage, and here's where it's listed here. Average assessment ratio here, and then we're going to touch on it. I'll touch on this. I wasn't planning on it, but for those of you that were at the board review, and that would have been those of you in the districts, Matt, Mark, and Steve, maybe you heard Bear talk about this assessment valuation has to fall within 90% or 110%. If it gets out of that for a period of 5 years, you have to do a citywide revaluation, because again, the state says you have to stay within those areas. Last year we're at 91%. That's kind of a low level, which means essentially, if you look at what your house is assessed at, it's obviously worth more than, and you see that a lot. Well, my assessment is always way lower. Well, as long as everyone's assessment in the city is the same level, it's not skewed anyway. But again, from the state looks at that and says, well, the homes in Durand are at a 90% level. We got to bump those up on an equalized to make it fair everywhere else to the other municipalities, again, within Pepin County, or in the school district's case, where they have different entities even outside the county. They represent townships in both Dunn and Buffalo, right? Yeah. So again, so that's again where that Equalized falls in for them, when they're sending this out. But I'm sorry, just really what I wanted to show you here is
So if
basically-
it gets worse than the 91% for 5 years.
For 5
then-
years, because so Barrett was kind of hoping that after this year with some of the adjustments, maybe that would bump back up to 90, because I think we did fall below 90 for this period.
Yep, we did.
But if we bump back up in there, then the clock starts again. And frankly, you don't want to go through a revaluation because A, they're expensive.
They're expensive.
And I think you said between $50,000, $60,000, where basically then he and people that work for him have to go in every home and business in the city to look things over and come up with make sure that everything's covered.
And realistically, a lot of people's taxes go up because of that, right?
Well, it depends, man, because if everyone goes up roughly the same, then it's just spread equally again. But if you have certain, or if there's, I mean, I think where you really see this thing is you get some areas maybe that you have a school district that has a lot of like lake homes. Those homes are going up at a higher rate than the typical 3-bedroom ranch that's maybe in the same municipality. In those cases, yes, some of those homes are, if the home's value goes higher than the average of the entire entity, their taxes are going up. If it's below, they're probably going down. If everyone goes up the same, then the taxes are pretty much going to be the same, unless the levy increases by a lot. But again, you don't see levy increases a lot because of the levy limits. So, and just again, just one final thing here, I just want to explain on our tax bill. So the county was like $7.39, or about $7.48. The school is about $7.51, and then CBTC down here is just tiny, about 4%. The rest of us are all right in that third. It's almost third. School
What is
district
the
a
issue
little
with
higher.
CBTC? I mean, does, it, like, if you live anywhere, like.
Yeah, within the CBTC district, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then when they levy their money, City of Durand gets a very small portion because.
And it's always been that way.
It's always been that way, yeah, for all of the technical college districts throughout the state.
And that's the reason why a few years ago, when they actually had a referendum,
Yep.
CBTC-wide, for building, and it did pass, I believe, and so that they've got to go through that same process that like the Durand Arkansas School has got to go through if they want to build.
Yep.
And they've got, for certain things, they have to do the same thing.
Exactly. And then, yeah, so then when it comes all down, so you add these, the total of this comes out to about $24.28. But then the school tax credit comes off the top. They don't give the school direct credit for that. They pass it off on there. So then our total mill rate last year for the city was $22.76. So again, if you owned $100,000 on a home that was assessed at $100,000, you paid $2,276. Less some of the credits you might have got down below the lottery credit.
So then if they pass, like when a school district passes a referendum, then
Yep.
that changes the mill rate for the school
Yep.
district's portion?
Yep, so basically, and again, Matt, so essentially, when we get the paperwork from the school, it's, okay, here's our standard levy below the limits, but then we we're allowed, and it's this much extra for the next, 9-10 years. They always have that on there as well. And then that's just lumped in with the school's total levy. And here's, so their total levy right here, last year of $858,000 for just the city of Durand, again, calculated based on equalized valuation. That included, I could split that out for you for general and referendum.
Okay.
And yeah, I think we talked about, the referendum you see quite a bit for schools. Fair to say that their levy limitations and things like that were a little more restrictive. So again, on the operational side, you see a lot for schools. And schools don't have an exemption for capital. So you'll see referendum, you hear that a lot, right, during election time, whether it's an operating referendum or a capital referendum that they want to add on to the school or things of that nature. Or in our case, we can just make that decision to do street projects, and if we borrow it back, pay it back, it's already exempt from that. Basically, one way of saying that, hey, your streets could go to heck in a hurry if you had to have a referendum every time you wanted to fix
But
it.
if we had some big, huge project, we could ultimately do a referendum.
What you can always do, so basically, sometimes you get so we're talking about kind of like a financial referendum that allows you to, but you also, you can have referendum just popularity of a project, for example. I'm forgetting the term for that at the moment, but. Yeah, like a non-binding referendum just on a topic.
And the one thing that we're seeing around here is, and I believe both the city of Eau Claire and the city of
Chippewa Falls.
are doing operational referenda for extra money so that they can exceed
Yeah.
the levy limits. It's basically for safety, you know, it's made for police officers, isn't that sort of
Yeah,
big
And
thing?
fire, I think.
Because
Police and fire,
yeah,
those types of
yeah.
things. So what
Because,
do
you know, to be honest, and going to conferences and talking to others that are in my shoes, you know, we all complain about the levy limits, we do. But to a degree, it hasn't hampered everyone with the same level of equalness, if you will. Small communities like ours that don't have a lot of increase in new construction, yeah, we're hurt a little bit. We don't get to go up and, you know, some other, you know, cities that have bigger increases, you know, you probably do some more things. However, in our case, there is no way, I mean, literally almost no way, that we could add another person, you know, to the tune of $70-some thousand without going to referendum. Basically, the only way we could do it, again, when we're allowed to raise it by maybe $10,000 a year, how would you ever do that and then continue every year? You basically, the only way you could do that is to find another way to cut $70,000 in your budget to make it work, get rid of something else equal. So I think, you know, most communities have made it work, but as the mayor just noted, you know, right now, this is probably the most I've ever seen talked about, even some big city referendum. For those that want to add significant number of people, that's the only way you can do it. And so again, both I know Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls at this point are looking at both police and fire, and I think some others. That's it. The fat, if you will, is gone. That's been trimmed away for years, and now you're just right down to the meat. So that's it. And then the final one, I did want to talk just a little bit about some of our employee costs, just to explain again. So we talked at the meeting the other night about some of that. I did want to note, so basically our total full-time payroll is about $685,000 a year for our 13 full-time employees. And by 13 full-time employees, we have basically 3 in the office, 3 full-time. Matt has four individuals that work for streets, utilities, things of that nature. We talked about, we have 4 police officers, and then we have the library director. Those are our 13 employees. On the health insurance side of things, the city pays about $250,000 a year for health insurance. The average kind of broken out is, the average family plan is just over $25,000 that the city pays. The single plan is about just over 10. Our plan is with Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. We do not have those rates yet either. Last year was a 5% increase. In some of my discussions with Mike Hansen, who represents them, you know, or we're kind of optimistic it should stay within that range, but we're not going to know for a little bit yet. But I'm putting 5% in the budget for now, and we'll adjust accordingly if necessary. And then the final thing is just on the pay, on the employee side of things, for those of you that don't quite, and haven't been maybe in the process much, is, so we also have our employees, and the city also pays into the Wisconsin retirement system. So for all of our general employees, myself, Public Works, and whatnot, last year that was at 6.5%. That one was, it used to be a case, so at 6.5%, it used to be, so that's basically a double amount. 6.5 employee, 6.5 employer. It used to be, before I believe it was 2010, when Governor Walker was in, the employer paid all of it. That got split then, and so basically since then, since basically 2011, the employee is required, if you're WRS eligible, which all of our full-time employees are, this year they pay 6.5%, and the city also pays 6.5% of their salary. For law enforcement or fire in those full-time cities, that number was 12%. 12% each, so basically 24% of the salary going into an account. That is increasing 13.2% in our case, it's just for police officers. And then from 6.5 to 6.8% for everyone else. I think it's fair to say the reason for that is some of the losses in the stock market and some of the increases in cost of living. So, I know I went through that really fast, but in a nutshell, that's kind of our budget process. And then again, those of you, especially at the main three committees, will be talking at length about the specifics of the departments of all of these items that I touched on here tonight.
And the one thing you noticed when you looked at the budget up there, when you're talking about, and I'm going to talk about some part of it, it's a little bit different, it's the library, which is a little bit, it has its own levy. We set that based on our levy limits, correct?
Yep. Yeah, they're included in our levy
So the
limits.
one thing about libraries in the state of Wisconsin is, a library board is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council, and then we also set, as far as the budget is concerned, but they're pretty autonomous. It's a little bit different, that the library board has control of doing that budgeting, and so, I mean, we obviously are paying them out of our things, but at the end of the day, in the state of Wisconsin, according to state statutes, they are quite autonomous. Again, we appoint them, and we set the budget, total amount that we will levy for the library, but again, the library board actually can, otherwise, because we set everything else, but that's the one we don't. Again, we get the total number, but as far as how that's divided up goes to the library.
Yeah, and again, we put it a little different way, so again, last year we allocated, so library, these are given figures. This is a guaranteed revenue source of 142, because it's property taxes from the city, and then they get a portion that's collected by the county for use of the library from other entities outside the city. So this is what they got for revenue. I can tell you they didn't spend that much for a number of reasons, and again, some of them are just more personnel side of things, so again, I'm not gonna get in the middle of that one. If Matt Gillis underspends his budget, it stays with the city, it goes to fund balance, we can use it for whatever else in future years. Same with me, same with Stan, same with others. On the library side of things, they get to keep that money. So essentially, if we gave them $77,000 on the levy and they didn't need that amount, it just stays with them, and they get to decide what they want to do with it in the future. The only control we have over them is what we levy for their purposes every year. So if you notice,
Swimming pool donation?
Yeah.
but yeah, and so back to here. Let's get back to this sheet just real quick. So back here, you notice that the libraries, we kept the library levy the same. I guess maybe it doesn't. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So we kept the library levy the same. That wasn't a punishment thing or anything by any stretch. It was just they carried over. I think it was over $20,000 that they didn't use. And so, hey, you don't need a levy increase if you carried over that much. So.
Well, that was my question. If they come in under budget, they shouldn't need as much the next year. So you should.
You're right.
But you have to have some unforeseen.
And it's the circumstances there were a little bit unique
Right.
on the personnel side of things, and but yeah, so we'll just leave it at that for now.
And the other part is, and this goes back to when I was on the county board, every year there's two libraries that are municipally run in Pepin County, us and Pepin. And so what they do is they keep track of how many people use the library, how many people check out books, how many, that type of thing, and so on and so forth. And then there's a certain amount of county levy, correct?
Yep.
That's divided up based on that usage. And so that's where that intergovernmental other part comes from. And there's a formula.
And interestingly, the library directors, I think that's their titles, just gave a presentation to the county board last week.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
was kind of intriguing. They're used way more than I think people realize.
Still, yeah.
Right, and yeah, again, like for our library, we did join the Moore system, and that is another way of basically you have even more people outside the area checking books out of your, and that's part of how those funding formulas are driven. The more books you have from other areas coming out of your library, the better. So, and clearly then the citizens of Durand and the area have a far larger selection than they would have had from just our library. And
Get random facts from Mr. Gillis.
Yeah. If he doesn't have the paper, you need it, right?
We learned a
well,
lot.
Mayor, that honestly took me a little longer than I thought it was going to, so I hope you found that.
Well, I hope everybody did. I do, and again,
Yeah.
as I said, explaining the process for everybody. And as we do, as we practically get into it, each one of the committees will review. It'll then go to finance and then to council as far as we put this together. With the, and then of course, the budget hearing, which is a requirement to do by a certain time, so that obviously we can get the information to the county so that tax bills can be organized And those are
Yeah.
okay.
And Merry Christmas, yeah.
Yeah, and then Merry Christmas, you get your tax bill in the mail. Anyway, questions about the process? Questions about anything that he talked about, any of the budgets?
So when you got done talking with the swim club, did those people kind of understand the reason we couldn't do more?
I'd like to think so. Again, from the standpoint, if they didn't, I'd be happy to do the same presentation. Again, this isn't magic, it just, it limits our ability to fund things that I think we'd all agree with are a little higher priority.
And the one thing that we said with them, he says, well, citizens are asking this. I said, if they have any questions,
Right.
come on down and ask, and I'd be happy to explain it to you, as far as how things went,
Exactly.
And I even made the comment, I have a public phone number, my home phone, people can call. I have returned every call that I've ever had since I've been mayor, so if I can't answer it, I can get you the direction if somebody has a question about it. Okay?
Scott, it seems like we did a reassessment when I was mayor
Okay.
a million years ago.
Revaluation, yeah.
And the mindset was because of my value went up, my taxes went up, and that was not the case at all.
Not necessarily the case,
Yeah,
no.
It was not, yeah.
Yeah, again.
Unless you've done, I'm assuming, done a lot of, kind
Right,
of
you've done, yeah.
revamping to your
yeah,
home over
yeah.
the, during that
Yeah,
time.
but typically, again, that's one of the reasons that we require permits.
But whenever.
It's because then those go to Barrett as well,
Yeah.
and so then he knows, and if he needs to get in the house, then he'll get in some of those, but yeah, I don't, when I bought my home, our first home in Eau Claire, it was, the first time we had the assessor in, it was, oh, the basement's finished, well, how long has that been? And I'm like, uh-oh. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions on that? Thank you for all that. Okay, next we move on to Public Safety, Police Department, anything from the chief?
I don't, and I know this is kind of maybe a little anticlimactic, but obviously, Chief Ridgway, after our meeting the other night, Chief Ridgway is staying. So I think that's been reported in the paper, but I just certainly wanted to note that. And yeah, he's on his annual hunting vacation, and so, yeah, that's really all I have for the police department.
Okay. Next up, discussion of possible action regarding special event, street closing request for the Trunk or Treat event coming up on October 29th. Similar to what we've had in the past. Going to do it on Main Street again. It seems like it's worked out quite well. And to do that, so everybody has a copy of the thing. Any other questions on that?
Not that it matters, but is it typical that the chief does these? I thought it usually comes from like the group that sponsors whatever event, isn't it?
Well, it kind of is in sense, yeah, since I guess I don't call him the sponsor, but he's kind of, yeah, so.
And he's, and they've always, since this event was started, it's sort of, he was the guy that started it.
Yeah, it is a little unique.
Make a motion to approve the street closing request for Trunk or Treat, October 29th from 1:30 PM to 6 PM.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the application for the street closing for the Trunk or Treat. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Okay. Fire department, any report from?
No reports from Chief.
Okay. Ambulance, Director Miller?
Yes. Everybody has my copy of the August report, and more than welcome to entertain any questions. Pretty uneventful month. I guess the big significant thing, if you will, is there is and there will continue to be an increase in long-distance transfer requests. And by that I mean hospitals from Eau Claire, possibly even Chippewa Falls, asking for availability of our ambulance to transfer patients. And it can be significant distance. There have been, I may have mentioned this previously, but there is an incredible shortage of beds available, and that's due to a number of things, staffing and you name it. But there have been some patients transferred to South Dakota, North Dakota, from Rice Lake and Eau Claire, and a lot of hospitals in Wisconsin. So it's kind of getting to be the norm. It really is. The one thing is, our ambulance service is a basic life support ambulance service, so we are not able to take critical care patients or even advanced life support patients that are on an IV or under any kind of medications that we do not have the authority to give currently. So that limits the number of transports that we have done or will have to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't transfers that can be done through a BLS service ambulance.
Maybe just to continue on that, so Mike and Jenny Kane, who does our billing for ambulance, we met a few times this week, about past week already, talking about some of these issues, and Jenny had some questions, making sure that we were, on the Medicare side of things, that we're covered outside of our area for these long distance. I mean, the specific one we had one to Madison, correct? That is the, and so, again, those decisions on the transfers are obviously on Mike's shoulders. Clearly, we have to basically have 4 people involved. These 2 people have to be on the call, or on the transfer, I should say. We had a trainee that went along on one, and that's fine as well. But clearly, we still have to have 2 on call back here for 911 emergencies.
Yes.
We're not taking people to Madison and leaving the people that we serve in this area
We will
behind. We will
never do that.
We can't do.
No.
So again, just clarifying that for those questions that come up. I heard a comment this week along the lines of, well, I hear we're taking people to Madison, but 2 months ago, we had a call for someone to go from Advent to Eau Claire, and we couldn't get two people to show up. And this is truly a timing issue. This is, if we have, again, those 4 people available, it works out. If we don't, we frankly can't do it. So, as Mike noted, there is the potential for making some money here. Again, the bill of Madison was over $3,000, and I think the cost of EMTs was under $5,000. So, we get a few of those, that helps our situation a lot without putting anyone else at risk in the area.
Would you say there's a little more interest from EMTs to take some of those longer ones, knowing that they can actually make a little bit of,
Yes.
not just an hour here or
Right.
there, but kind of
Yes.
okay.
But I have seen, sorry.
The ambulos use the 2 ambulance for the transports.
The backup ambulance is the one that's taken on the transfer, yes.
But you're rotating now.
We are,
right? So
once
it's
a
not
month.
like the old where they used
Right.
to use
No, 1 month
the
it
old
might be
road.
the brand new ambulance, or the newer ambulance, and the next month it might be the second one. So, what I was going to say though, in reference to not making some of the Advent health transfers is, in my threads that I've seen of the EMTs, when a transfer does come in, there is aggressive, hey, can you cover 911 for me so I can take that call from Advent? It has been for months and months, aggressive, trying to get a team of 4 people to make that happen. So I don't want anyone to think that the local Advent health transfers are being overlooked in favor of a greater distance and more hours transfer, because they're not. They're working hard on all of the transfers we get.
Okay.
Kudos on the 22 for 22.
Yeah.
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 I always like to see that.
That's-
And-
22
and-
911
yeah, I was
calls.
gonna ask,
That's
I'm
the key.
going to the ambulance meeting next week, and
Yeah.
I will certainly share that with staff as well, Mike.
Question about the CPR, you said that they have availability to train within our service. Does that mean like within your EMTs, or if like somebody in the community needs a CPR class?
I don't know any reason why you couldn't contact any of those 3 to see if they would be willing to.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep.
Did I remember the driver of the ambulance has different criteria, like a firefighter, did I hear that they could drive the ambulance, they have to have or that's not a thing?
No, we have currently, our state requirements are we have to have minimum staffing to transport a patient, at least an EMR, emergency medical responder, and one EMT basic. We like to try to respond to every single call with 2 EMT basics, but we have that variance, the waiver that will allow us to transport with an EMR and an EMT basic. If it's a critical call or something where, especially like a pulseless non-breather, we almost always will try to pull a driver, whether it's somebody from law enforcement. I mean, I had the police chief drive me up the hill from a really significant trauma earlier this year, and that will happen. And I notice now on our timesheets we have a box for if we get a driver from the fire department, they get $13 an hour to drive the ambulance on a call, and typically it wouldn't ever be more than 1 hour. It would be 1 hour or less. So that is done, but the driver is still responsible for care on scene and would help their partner up until the point where they're...
It's like on a transfer to Madison.
We wouldn't pull a firefighter or anyone else other than somebody from the ambulance staff for a transfer. Mhm.
Just for the risk in case something went wrong.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
just
Well,
especially in a long
there's
time.
really no
Yeah.
need for that, yeah. I mean, and legally, we couldn't take a driver who's a non-EMR or non-EMT basic and one EMT basic in the back to minimize our staffing to like 3, if that's what you're kind of requiring. Yeah, no, that would be illegal. We wouldn't be able to do that. Yeah. So, and it's for the reason that Scott said, is if something bad happened to the patient, the driver would also be responsible for pulling over and helping in the back.
Any other questions for the ambulance? Sir? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Next we go on to Public Works Utilities. Engineers report, anything?
Just one note from Russ, we are finalizing our payment to SSG, and the next meeting we should have a final payment, and the entire project will be put to bed. And looking at it, it's going to be about $1,800, I think, is what's locked out there. So.
Okay. Anything for the monthly report for Public Works Utilities?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just one other thing on the more Russ's side of things. So Matt checked with him today too, that we're still waiting on the grant for Main, the potential grant for Main Street, and I think Russ indicated that hopefully we're going to find out by the end of this month. We haven't heard anything yet, so hopefully very soon on that as well. Again, we know we did get the grant for Madison, but frankly, if we got the grant for Main Street, that would probably take priority. It was a better opportunity, so we're still waiting on that.
Anything else for Public
That's
Works Utilities? Okay, next we move on, discussion and possible action regarding the awarding of bids for the Durand Community Pool Replacement Project. As you know, earlier this week, we had a meeting. We had the Superintendent Gillis, Administrator Rasmussen, and myself met with some members of the pool group, and also major donors, major donor with the project. And I think we had a good conversation. We were able to tell everybody where we're at. Now, the one thing that I am, and this is tonight about, still not making a decision. The one thing is I have mentioned at previous meetings about looking for another potential major donor or two. And again, we were on some just on one of those things, we're on a 60-day with these bids. Now, what ends up happening is this: any of those bids we have to accept by the 9th of October.
Correct.
If we don't, and again, so the reason why I'm asking everybody to hold on a little bit here is because I was hoping to know on that situation by the end of this week. And here's the situation. I mean, either it comes in, and if it doesn't, then the decision is already probably made. We don't have the funds to continue, and then we reorganize. And what we talked about reorganizing is that we would come back and look at, just because of what we've learned, and I know you folks have heard some through that, as far as if we had to rebid the project and see what we were gonna do, that we're looking at the summer of 2024. The idea of rebidding the project, again, to try to do a fall, spring thing, probably wouldn't work. And that's, at least from what we've learned, for how far out most of these pool companies are presently working. But again, but we'd also reorganize. We'd say what we're doing, looking at the project, doing those types of things. So, and again, I think, again, we brought everybody up to speed where we're at, and again, moving forward. So at this point here, not ready to go ahead and so on. Now, what would happen if all of a sudden something came together? We'd call a special meeting for next week, because we don't meet again, obviously, until October the 12th. So we would have to, but we would call a special meeting if we believed that it was necessary to do so. Do I believe that we have to call a special meeting if we don't accept the bids? Probably not.
We don't, we can just let them lapse.
They just lapse.
They just lapse.
If we don't approve the bids in the 60 days,
Yeah.
they just go. Now, I might say something, maybe we would take some official action after the next meeting, so on and so forth, if that was, but again, we're on that 60-day. So that's where we're at right now. But again, hopefully I should know something in the next couple of days, and at that point, and if there was a necessary reason to have a meeting, then I would call a meeting. But the only reason why we're going to call a meeting is because of the fact that we feel confident that we would have the funding in place to move forward.
And probably fair to say, Mayor, the most likely, that if we were to call a meeting, it'd probably be Wednesday night, where a few of us are meeting for Public Works anyway.
Yeah, and that's right, so next week we are meeting on the 5th?
Yeah.
That's right on the thing, so, didn't officially have it on the calendar yet. And doing that, so, okay, any questions? Okay, let's pay the bills.
Thanks for all your work on trying to get it to happen.
I appreciate it. And I noticed we talked about future meetings, Public Works meeting on, do we have the time on that?
No, I would guess.
City grant, where's the city grant at?
5 p.m.?
Is that our utility bill? Yeah, that's our utility
Oh,
bill.
gotcha.
Our water and sewer bill is finished box.
That's safety committee meeting on the 12th. That's just,
Budget meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Same
budget.
as council meeting?
Yes.
We're gonna try, yeah. So probably like 5 o'clock-ish, and typically the public safety does not take anywhere near as long as Public Works, so.
What time is the public works meeting?
I think we were shooting for 5, if that works for everyone.
Yeah, that's what.
The mayor asked me, do you have a time?
In public safety, probably, it's just right now, at least pencil in 5 for the
5
12th.
o'clock as well.
While we're doing that, I don't know if anybody else had any other future agenda items.
So I'll work on setting up that meeting for planning commission and the zoning. That'll be, but yeah, obviously I need some information first.
Still, I get, my sister's watching local news down there through Facebook. My sister's, my nieces, they've got the cameras down there, and she's going through, but no, my mother has not specifically contacted us. But I've seen some posts from Sarasota saying there's a good bunch of different, there's good in different areas, but down trees, no power, and doing all that other stuff. And they do have a camera, a live camera, a city camera at the corner intersection of Fruitville Road and Lockridge, which is, by the way, that's the intersection you go into my mom's housing development, so.
Is that's up and running?
Yeah, I would say it's operating. Yeah.
Well, see, that's what, I don't know, she said that she tried to link it, my niece tried to link into it to see. And again, yeah, that's, Matt, you're right, what's working and what's not working.
Right.
When you had 100 and,
So your mom and neighbors all out there waiting.
I mean, food for thought, they do make, I know, like, satellite type little things. Actually, I was thinking about getting my dad one. They're like ways, and they're not terribly expensive, but there are ways that you can text back and forth using satellite.
not using the.
That would be a perfect situation right here, that,
Yeah, because if the cell situation's bad, you know.
I don't think you're gonna wanna sit and text back and forth, but, hey, we're
Just,
okay.
right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's
First,
what I'm
time,
for.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's just, I think
Okay,
it's
we
just
have
a
a-
text message.
We have a motion to, Councilmember Scott, is there a second for the vouchers?
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the vouchers. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Schofield.
Yes.
Councilmember Gillis.
Yes.
Councilmember Weisenbeck.
Yes.
Councilmember Raisler.
Yes.
Councilmember Hooker.
Yes.
Councilmember Hayden.
Yes.
All six in favor.
Okay. They are approved. Next, any other future issues, agenda items coming up? As I said, we have the list of the meetings. The two committee meetings that we have here will be 5 o'clock at this point for the Public Works and Safety. If not, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.